Welcome to the Moonlit Archive. Tonight's entry, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. There is a light on the horizon. It has been burning for 1600 years. Through the reigns of Ptolemies and Caesars, through the rise of Rome and the coming of Islam, through earthquakes and storms and the slow erosion of time, the light has burned. Sailors crossing the Mediterranean see it from 30 miles away. A single point of flame against the darkness, steady and sure, calling them home. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. The Pharos. Of all the 7 wonders of the ancient world, this was the most useful. The Great Pyramid was a tomb. The Colossus was a statue. The Temple of Artemis was a place of worship. But the Pharos was something simpler and more profound, a guide for those who were lost, a beacon for those who were far from home. For 16 centuries, it stood at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea, where the Nile Delta meets the waves. By day, its white marble tower rose against the Egyptian sky, visible for miles in every direction. By night, its fire burned at the summit, reflected by a great bronze mirror that threw the light far out to sea. Ships came to Alexandria from every corner of the known world. Grain ships from the Egyptian heartland, laden with wheat for the hungry cities of Rome. Trading vessels from Greece and Phoenicia, carrying wine and olive oil and the purple dye that emperors wore. Merchants from Arabia bearing spices, from India bearing gems, from Africa bearing ivory and gold. All of them saw the light. All of them found their way homes. Tonight we journey to ancient Alexandria, to an island called Pharos, to a tower that touched the sky, to a flame that never died. We will meet the architect who built it, the workers who kept it burning, the travelers who marveled at its glory. We will watch the sunrise turn its white marble to gold. We will climb the spiral ramp to its summit and look out across the endless sea. We will stand beside the fire as darkness falls and the great mirror begins to glow. And we will watch it fall at last, stone by stone, into the waves that it once illuminated. There is no test tomorrow, no notes to take, no need to remember anything at all. Simply rest and let the light guide you, as it guided countless sailors across the wine-dark sea, through storms and calms, through darkness and dawn, all the way to harbour. Let us begin in the 4th century before the Common Era, on the shores of Egypt, where a young king planted the seed of a city that would change the world. Before there was a lighthouse, there was a dream. Alexander the Great stood on the shore of the Mediterranean in the spring of 331 before the Common Era. He was 25 years old. He had already conquered Greece, already defeated the Persian armies at Granicus and Issus, already laid siege to the island fortress of Tyre and brought it crashing into the sea. Now he stood at the edge of Egypt, looking out at the water. Before him lay a small fishing village called Rakitis. It was not much to look at, a few huts on a narrow limestone ridge, where fishermen mended their nets and dried their catches in the sun. To the north, across a strip of water, lay an island called Pharos. Homer had mentioned it in the Odyssey, calling it a day's sail from the Nile. Now it sat empty and windswept, home only to seabirds. But Alexander saw something the fishermen could not see. He saw a city. The legend tells us that Alexander paced out the city walls himself, marking the foundations with barley meal when chalk ran short. He planned broad streets and grand squares, temples and palaces, markets and harbours. He imagined a city that would rival Athens, that would surpass Babylon, that would become the greatest metropolis in the world. He called it Alexandria. There would be other Alexandrias, dozens of them, scattered across his empire from Egypt to Afghanistan. But this would be the greatest. This would be the city that bore his name into eternity. The architect Dinocrates of Rhodes designed the layout. The streets were arranged in a grid, running north to south and east to west, so that the cooling winds from the sea could flow through every corner of the city. Canals were cut from the Nile, bringing fresh water to every quarter. The city was divided into sections, Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, each with its own customs and traditions, all united under one name. And at the centre of Alexander's vision was the harbour. Egypt was wealthy beyond measure. The Nile Valley produced grain in quantities that staggered the imagination, enough to feed half the Mediterranean world. The deserts held gold and precious stones. The trade routes led to India and Arabia, to the spice markets of the East and the ivory hunters of Africa. All of this wealth needed a port. It needed a place where ships could gather, where merchants could trade, where the treasures of Egypt could flow out to the world and the goods of the world could flow in. Alexandria would be that port. But first, the harbour had to be protected. The coast of Egypt was treacherous. The waters near the shore were shallow and littered with sandbars. Reefs lurked beneath the surface, invisible until a ship struck them. Storms could blow up without warning, driving vessels onto the rocks or sweeping them out to sea. Many ships had been lost here. Many sailors had drowned within sight of land, unable to find the entrance to safety. Something was needed. Something that could guide ships through the darkness, that could mark the harbour mouth, that could be seen from far out at sea. Something like a lighthouse. Alexander never saw his city completed. He left Egypt after only a few months, marching east to confront the Persian king Darius at Gorgamla. He would go on to conquer Persia, to cross the mountains into India, to build an empire that stretched from Greece to the Ganges. But he never returned to Alexandria. In 323 before the Common Era, at the age of 32, Alexander died in Babylon. Some said he was poisoned. Others blamed fever, or the accumulated wounds of a dozen battles, or the simple exhaustion of a man who had conquered the world and found no more worlds to conquer. His body was placed in a golden coffin and prepared for the long journey home to Macedonia. But it never arrived. Alexander's generals gathered like wolves around a dying fire. There were 7 of them who had been his closest companions, the somatophylakes, they were called, the bodyguards. For 20 years they had followed Alexander across the world. They had shared his victories and his sorrows, his triumphs and his rages. Now they looked at each other across his cooling corpse and wondered who would inherit the empire. Among them was a man named Ptolemy. He was perhaps 40 years old. Some whispered that he was Alexander's half-brother, an illegitimate son of Philip II of Macedon, raised in the household but never acknowledged. Whether or not this was true, Ptolemy had been Alexander's companion since childhood, one of the pages who served in the royal court, one of the young men who had been educated alongside the future conqueror. He was shrewd, this Ptolemy. Shrewd enough to see that the empire could not hold together, that the generals would soon be at each other's throats, that the grand unity of Alexander's conquest would shatter into a dozen warring kingdoms. And shrewd enough to choose his prize carefully. In the division of the empire, Ptolemy claimed Egypt. It was not the most obvious choice. Babylon was grander, Persia was wealthier, Macedonia was home, but Egypt had something that no other province possessed. It was defensible. To the west lay the Libyan desert, trackless and empty. To the east lay the Sinai, a wilderness of sand and stone. To the south lay the cataracts of the Nile, impassable to armies. And to the north lay the sea. Egypt was a fortress made by nature herself. An army might march across the desert, but it would arrive exhausted and thirsty, easy prey for defenders who held the wells. A fleet might threaten the coast, but there was only one good harbour, Alexandria, and that could be fortified. Ptolemy chose Egypt, and Egypt made him a king. But he needed something more than good defences. He needed legitimacy. He was not Alexander. He was not even Macedonian royalty. He was a general who had claimed a province, one warlord among many. Why should the Egyptians follow him? Why should the Greeks in Alexandria accept his rule? Why should the world recognize him as anything more than a usurper? Ptolemy found his answer in the most precious relic of the age. Alexander's body. The great conqueror's remains were being transported back to Macedonia, borne in a magnificent funeral carriage pulled by 64 mules. The cart was decorated with gold and precious stones, and crowds gathered wherever it passed to pay their respects to the fallen king. Ptolemy intercepted it. Exactly how he did this is uncertain. Some accounts say he simply rode out with an armed escort and took it by force. Others say he bribed the funeral escort, or substituted a fake body, or convinced the other generals that Egypt was the rightful destination all along. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Alexander's body came to Egypt. First, Ptolemy placed the body in Memphis, the ancient capital of the pharaohs. It rested there in a sarcophagus of gold, while the city of Alexandria was still being built. Later, when Alexandria was ready, the body was moved to a grand tomb at the heart of the city. The Soma, it was called, the body. Visitors came from across the world to see it, to pay homage to the conqueror who had changed history. And Ptolemy, the guardian of Alexander's remains, was recognized as the legitimate ruler of Egypt. In 305 before the Common Era, he took the title of king. He was Ptolemy Isota, Ptolemy the Saviour. His dynasty would rule Egypt for nearly 300 years, until the death of Cleopatra and the coming of Rome. But before all that, he had a city to build. And a lighthouse to imagine. Let us leave the palace and walk down to the harbour. The city of Alexandria is still young. The streets are fresh and clean, the buildings bright with whitewash and paint. Workers are everywhere, masons and carpenters, engineers and labourers, slaves and freemen, all labouring to realise Alexander's dream. We pass through the Greek Quarter, where philosophers debate in shaded colonnades. We pass the Jewish Quarter, where scholars are already beginning the work that will produce the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. We pass the Egyptian quarter, where the old gods still receive their offerings and the ancient customs still hold sway. And then we reach the harbour. It is vast. The great harbour stretches before us, protected by a natural breakwater of reefs and shallows. Ships crowd the quays, hundreds of them, their masts rising like a forest of stripped trees. The air smells of salt and tar, of fish and spices, of the cargoes of 100 distant lands. To our left, the Heptastadion stretches out across the water. It is a causeway, 7 stadia long, about 3/4 of a mile. It connects the mainland to an island that lies just offshore, creating 2 protected harbours where before there was only one. The great harbour where we stand handles the royal fleet and the most precious cargoes. The Eunostus harbour on the other side serves the commercial traffic. Workers are still building the Heptastadion, laying massive blocks of stone in the shallow water. In time, it will become so wide and so solid that the island will seem part of the mainland itself. Centuries from now, the channel will silt up completely, and the former island will become a peninsula. But for now, the island is still distinct. It is called Pharos. Homer knew this island. In the Odyssey, he tells how Menelaus was stranded on Pharos during his journey home from Troy, and how he captured the sea god Proteus there to learn the secrets of the future. The old fishermen say that Proteus still haunts these waters, changing his shape to escape those who would question him. But there are no gods on Pharos now. Only workers and engineers, surveyors and architects, preparing for the greatest construction project the world has ever seen. At the eastern tip of the island, where the water is deepest and the rocks are most stable, they are laying the foundations of a tower. It will be called the Pharos after the island where it stands, and in time that name will spread across the world. The French will call their lighthouses Phares, the Italians and Spanish will say Faro. The Portuguese will speak of Farol, all of them remembering this place, this island, this tower that has not yet been built. But that is still far in the future. For now, there is only rock and rubble, and the dream of a light that will shine across the sea. Every great work has a builder. The pyramids had Imhotep, the Parthenon had Phidias and Ictinus, the Colosseum would have architects whose names we have forgotten, but the Pharos had Sostratus. Sostratus of Cnidus. He came from the Greek city of Cnidus, on the coast of what is now Turkey. His father, Dexiphanes, was also an architect, a man who had built the Tetra Stadium in Alexandria, one of the city's early monuments. Architecture ran in the family. But Sostratus was more than an architect. He was an engineer, a diplomat, a problem solver of remarkable ingenuity. Before he designed the lighthouse, he had already proved his worth to the Ptolemaic dynasty in the most dramatic way possible. When Ptolemy first came to Egypt, the city of Memphis was held by his enemies. The ancient capital was well fortified, supplied by the Nile, seemingly impregnable. A siege could last for years. Sostratus had a different idea. He dammed the Nile. He did not block it entirely, that would have been impossible. But he diverted enough of its flow, channeled enough of its water into temporary reservoirs, that the river rose and rose until it flooded the city. Memphis fell without a battle. The defenders, standing waist-deep in water, had no choice but to surrender. Ptolemy remembered this. When he needed someone to design the greatest lighthouse in history, he knew whom to call. Sostratus travelled throughout the Greek world as Ptolemy's emissary. He negotiated treaties, settled disputes, smoothed the way for Ptolemaic influence in cities from Athens to Syracuse. He was a man who could talk to kings and labourers alike, who could solve problems that seemed insoluble, who could see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. In his hometown of Cnidus, he built a famous causeway. It stretched across the harbour on arches of stone, beautiful and functional, connecting the two halves of the city. Visitors came from across the Greek world to admire it. But the lighthouse would be his masterpiece. Ptolemy commissioned it around 297 before the Common Era. The king was growing old. He would die in 282, leaving his throne to his son Ptolemy II Philadelphus. But he wanted to see the work begun before he died. He wanted to know that his city would have its beacon. The construction would take years. Perhaps 12 years, perhaps 20, perhaps as many as 33. The ancient sources disagree. What is certain is that the lighthouse was not finished until after Ptolemy I's death. His son saw it completed, saw the first fire lit at its summit, saw the light reach out across the dark Mediterranean. But the design was Sostratus's. Every stone, every ramp, every chamber, all of it came from his mind. There is a story about Sostratus and the lighthouse. It is said that Ptolemy wanted his own name inscribed on the building. This was the custom of kings, to take credit for the works that others built, to stamp their names on monuments for future generations to read. But Sostratus was proud. He had designed the greatest building since the pyramids. He had solved engineering problems that no one had solved before. He had created something that would stand for centuries, that would guide ships across the sea, that would become one of the wonders of the world. He wanted his name to be remembered. So he devised a plan. First, he carved his own inscription in metal letters, 53 centimeters tall, set into the stone of the lighthouse. The words said, "Sostratus, the son of Dexiphanes, the Cnidian, dedicated this to the saviour gods, on behalf of those who sail the seas." Then he covered this inscription with a layer of gypsum plaster, and on the plaster he wrote whatever dedication Ptolemy demanded. For a while the king's name was visible, but gypsum is soluble. The rain of winter, the salt spray of summer, the constant moisture of the sea air, all of these ate away at the plaster, year by year, decade by decade. In time, the plaster dissolved entirely, and there, beneath it, the metal letters of Sostratus's inscription gleamed in the sunlight. His name endured. Some historians doubt this story. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century of the Common Era, tells a different version. He says that Ptolemy graciously allowed Sostratus to sign the monument, recognizing the architect's genius and granting him the honor he deserved. We may never know the truth, but the story of the hidden inscription has persisted for 2,000 years. Perhaps that persistence is its own kind of truth. Either way, the name of Sostratus has survived. The kings who commissioned great works are often forgotten. The builders who created them are sometimes remembered. And sometimes the builders outlast the kings. Building the Pharos was like building a mountain. The tower would rise over 100 meters into the sky, as tall as a 30-story building, second in height only to the Great Pyramid of Giza. It would weigh thousands of tons. It would stand on an island of sand and rock, battered by waves, exposed to the fiercest storms the Mediterranean could produce. And it would have to last forever. The first challenge was the foundation. Pharos Island was not solid bedrock. It was a mixture of sand and limestone, unstable in places, prone to shifting and settling. A building as massive as the lighthouse would sink into such ground like a stone into mud. Sostratus's engineers dug deep. They excavated down to the most stable layers, removing sand and gravel until they reached rock that could bear the weight. Then they laid a wide platform of massive stone blocks, spreading the load across as broad an area as possible. The platform was enormous, some accounts say 30 meters on each side. It would later become the foundation for the Citadel of Qaitbay, which still stands on the site today. When you visit that medieval fortress, you are standing on stones that Sostratus laid over 2,000 years ago. The building materials came from across Egypt. Limestone was quarried locally, from the same deposits that had provided stone for the pyramids. It was the same light-coloured rock that gleamed white in the Egyptian sun that gave the lighthouse its brilliant daytime visibility. Granite came from Aswan, far to the south, transporting hundreds of miles down the Nile on barges. It was harder than limestone, more resistant to the salt spray and pounding waves. The engineers used it for structural reinforcement, for the joints and corners where the greatest stresses would fall. And white marble sheathed the exterior, polished until it shone. Ancient visitors described the lighthouse as dazzling, as difficult to look at in full sunlight, as bright as a beacon even before the fire was lit. The design was unlike anything that had been built before. 3 tiers rising one above another. The lowest tier was square, a massive block of stone rising 77 meters, with slightly sloping walls that made it look even taller than it was. The second tier was octagonal, narrower than the first, clad in brick and mortar. The third tier was circular, housing the fire and the mirror, crowned by a colossal statue. This 3-tiered design would influence architecture for millennia. The early Islamic minarets of Egypt, the towers from which the call to prayer rings out, echo the Pharos in their proportions, their stepped profiles, their progression from square to octagonal to round. The lighthouse was not just a building, it was a template. Inside the tower, a spiral ramp wound upward around a central core. The ramp was wide enough for 2 horses to pass, wide enough for pack animals laden with fuel. It rose gently, climbing 77 meters in a long spiral that circled the core again and again. Small windows pierced the outer wall at intervals, admitting shafts of light that illuminated the ramp by day. Off the ramp on each floor were chambers. Some were storerooms holding fuel for the fire. Some were guardhouses where soldiers watched for enemies approaching by sea. Some were living quarters where the workers who tended the flame could eat and sleep between their shifts. A medieval visitor named Al-Balawi, who explored the lighthouse in 1165, counted the chambers on each floor. 18 on the second level, 14 on the third, 17 on the fourth. The interior was a labyrinth, he said, a place where a visitor could wander for hours and become hopelessly lost. Ibn Jubayr, another medieval traveller, described the same experience. He wrote of stairways and entrances and numerous apartments, so numerous that one who penetrates and wanders through them may be lost. The lighthouse was not just a tower. It was a small city rising vertically into the sky. Let us approach the lighthouse as a visitor would have approached it. We are standing on the mainland at the base of the Heptastadian Causeway. Before us, the causeway stretches out across the shallow water, broad and straight, paved with massive blocks of stone. The wind blows from the north, carrying the smell of salt and the cries of seabirds. We begin to walk. The causeway is busy. Carts rumble past us, laden with goods for the harbour. Merchants hurry by, arguing prices in Greek and Egyptian and a dozen other tongues. Soldiers patrol in pairs, their bronze armour glinting in the sun. On either side of us, the water laps against the stone. To our left is the great harbour, where the royal fleet rides at anchor. To our right is the Eunostus, the commercial harbour, crowded with trading vessels from every port in the Mediterranean. Ahead of us, the island of Pharos grows larger with every step. We can see the buildings there, warehouses and workshops, barracks and stables. And rising above them all, impossibly tall, the lighthouse. Even from here, it takes our breath away. It is white, brilliant white, gleaming in the Egyptian sun. The marble facing catches the light and throws it back, so bright that we must shield our eyes. The tower rises and rises, tier upon tier, until it seems to pierce the very sky. We walk faster now, eager to see it up close. At the end of the causeway, we step onto Pharos Island. The lighthouse looms above us, its base lost in a complex of smaller buildings. Workers move about their business, some carrying bundles of fuel, others leading oxen toward the great ramp that leads to the tower entrance. We follow the path toward the lighthouse. The ground slopes upward slightly as we approach. The tower stands on the highest point of the island for maximum visibility. And then we see the ramp. It stretches before us like a road into the sky, 223 feet of gentle incline, supported by 16 stone arches that march like soldiers toward the tower entrance. The ramp is wide enough for 2 carts to pass, wide enough for the oxen that carry fuel to climb side by side. We begin to climb. The air grows cooler as we rise above the island. The breeze is stronger here, carrying the salt smell of the sea. Below us, we can see the rooftops of the buildings we passed, the curve of the causeway, the glittering waters of the harbour. We pass beneath one arch, then another, then another. The tower grows larger above us, its massive stones blocking out the sky. We can see the windows now, small rectangular openings, evenly spaced, that admit light to the interior. And then we reach the entrance. The entrance to the lighthouse is a masterpiece in itself. The doorway rises 13 meters above us, over 40 feet. The lintel and jambs are carved from single blocks of granite, transporting from the quarries of Aswan hundreds of miles to the south. These stones alone weigh dozens of tons. Fitting them into place required engineering genius and the labour of hundreds of workers. When Geneviève Empereur, the French archaeologist, discovered these stones on the sea floor in 1994, He knew immediately what he had found. Nothing else could account for their size, their shape, their obvious purpose. They were the doorway to the Pharos. We passed through the entrance into a cool, dim space. The contrast with the bright exterior is startling. Our eyes take a moment to adjust. Gradually, we begin to make out our surroundings. We stand in a chamber at the base of the tower. The walls rise around us, massive blocks of limestone fitted together with precision. The ceiling is high above, 20 feet or more, supported by thick columns of granite. From here, the spiral ramp begins its long climb to the summit. We can hear voices echoing in the dimness. Workers call to one another, coordinating their tasks. Oxen low as they are led toward the ramp, their hooves clattering on the stone floor. The air smells of lamp oil and animals, of smoke and sweat. Let us climb. The ramp is gentle, designed for pack animals, not for running. We walk steadily upward, circling the central core, passing one window after another. Each window offers a glimpse of the world outside, a flash of blue sky, a shimmer of distant water, a slice of the city spread out below. We pass doorways leading to the inner chambers. Some stand open, revealing storerooms stacked with amphorae of oil. Others are guarded by soldiers who eye us suspiciously as we pass. Still others are closed, their secrets hidden behind wooden doors banded with iron. The climb is long. We pause to rest at one of the windows, looking out at the great harbour far below. Ships that seemed enormous from the quay now look like toys, their masts like twigs, their crews like ants. We can see the causeway stretching back to the mainland, the palace quarter with its gardens and colonnades, the temple of Serapis rising on its hill. And beyond the city, the green ribbon of the Nile Delta spreading toward the south, and beyond that the desert, endless, golden, shimmering in the heat. We resume our climb. The air grows warmer as we ascend. We are approaching the fire now, and we can smell the smoke more strongly with each step. The light from above grows brighter, not sunlight, but something else. Something orange and flickering. Finally, we reach the first platform. We emerge from the enclosed ramp onto an open terrace, surrounded by a low wall. The wind hits us immediately, strong and steady, carrying the salt of the sea. We are 77 meters above the ground, nearly 250 feet. We have climbed the first tier, 2 more await us above. The second tier rises from the platform like a tower on a tower. It is octagonal, 8-sided, narrower than the square base below. The walls are clad in brick rather than marble, giving them a reddish hue that contrasts with the brilliant white below. Another ramp spirals upward within, leading to the third and final level. We climb again. This section is shorter than the first, but steeper. The ramp is narrower here. No oxen make this climb. The fuel is winched up on ropes or carried on the backs of workers who have made this journey 1,000 times. The air grows warmer still. The smell of smoke is thick now, mixed with something else, the scent of burning oil, rich and slightly acrid. We pass through a final doorway and emerge onto another platform, smaller than the first. The circular third tier rises above us, its walls curved like a great drum. And at its summit we see the fire. It burns in a great brazier of bronze, fed by a constant supply of oil. Workers move around it, adding fuel, adjusting the flames, wiping the sweat from their faces. The heat is intense. Even from this distance, we can feel it pressing against our skin. Behind the fire stands the mirror. It is enormous, perhaps 7 cubits across, nearly 3.5 meters. The bronze has been polished until it gleams like gold, curved in a gentle arc that gathers the light and throws it outward. By day, it catches the sunlight and sends a blinding beam across the water. By night, it reflects the fire, amplifying its glow until it can be seen from 30 miles away. And above the fire, above the mirror, the statue. Ancient sources disagree about who it represents. Some say Zeus Soter, Zeus the savior to whom the lighthouse was dedicated. Some say Poseidon, god of the sea, whose domain surrounds this tower on every side. Some say Helios, the sun god, whose light the lighthouse emulates. And some say it is a Ptolemaic king, perhaps Ptolemy I himself or his son Philadelphus, who completed the work. The figure stands with arm raised, perhaps holding a torch, perhaps pointing toward the horizon, a guardian watching over the ships below. Around the base of the statue, 4 smaller figures stand, tritons, the sea gods, their fishtails curling beneath them, their conch-shell trumpets raised to lips that never sound. We have reached the summit. Below us, the world spreads out like a map. The Mediterranean stretches to the northern horizon, empty and vast, the deep blue of legend and poetry. To the east and west, the coast of Egypt curves away, a thin line of green between desert and sea. To the south, the city of Alexandria shimmers in the heat, its white buildings and broad streets, its temples and palaces, its harbors crowded with the ships of 100 nations. And here, at the top of the world, the fire burns. Someone must tend the fire. It burns day and night, winter and summer, storm and calm. It cannot be allowed to go out, not for an hour, not for a minute. Ships depend on it. Lives depend on it. The reputation of Alexandria depends on it. And so there are workers here always, keeping the flame alive. They work in shifts. Some tend the fire by day, when the smoke provides a visible column that marks the harbour entrance. Others take the night watch, when the flame itself becomes the beacon, its orange glow reflected by the great bronze mirror. The fire keepers are specialists. They know how much oil to add and when. They know how to adjust the flames for maximum brightness, not so high that the fuel burns too quickly, not so low that the light dims. They understand the relationship between heat and visibility, between fuel consumption and flame intensity. It is a demanding job. The heat at the summit is brutal, especially in summer. The workers strip down to loincloths, their skin glistening with sweat, their faces flushed from the furnace they tend. They drink constantly, water hauled up from below in clay jars, and still they grow dehydrated, exhausted, drained. When their shift ends, they descend the ramp to the quarters below, where they can rest in the relative coolness of the stone chambers. Others take their place, fresh and rested, ready for another round with the flames. The mirror keepers work alongside them. The great bronze mirror must be cleaned constantly. Smoke and soot from the fire coat its surface, dimming its reflectivity. Salt spray rises on the wind, leaving a haze that must be polished away. The workers use soft cloths and polishing compounds, rubbing the bronze until it gleams. They also adjust the mirror's angle. During the day, it must be positioned to catch the sunlight and throw it seaward. At night, it must be aligned with the fire to maximize the reflection. As the sun moves across the sky, as the flames dance and flicker, the mirror must be constantly repositioned. The mirror keepers understand optics in a way that few ancient people did. They know how angles of incidence equal angles of reflection. They know how curved surfaces focus light. They may not have had the mathematical language to describe what they did, but they understood the principles through practice and observation. Below the summit, other workers keep the lighthouse running. At the base of the tower, 300 oxen are stabled. These animals provide the muscle power that moves fuel up the ramp, amphorae of oil, bundles of wood, whatever is needed to keep the fire burning. Handlers tend them, feeding and watering them, leading them on their endless journeys up the spiral ramp. Soldiers guard the lighthouse. This is a strategic position. Whoever controls the lighthouse controls access to Alexandria's harbours. Guards patrol the entrance, check the credentials of visitors, watch for signs of sabotage or attack. Administrators manage the complex. They track fuel consumption, schedule shifts, maintain records, requisition supplies. The lighthouse is a government operation, funded by the Ptolemaic treasury, staffed by paid workers rather than slaves. And watchmen scan the horizon from the summit, looking for approaching ships. They can see vessels from many miles away, long before the ships can see the shore. When they spot something of interest, a royal vessel, an enemy fleet, a ship in distress, they send signals down to the city below. The lighthouse is not just a beacon. It is an early warning system, a communications centre, a symbol of royal power visible from 20 miles out to sea. Let us stay for the night watch. The sun is setting over the Mediterranean. The sky turns from blue to gold to deep crimson, the colours reflected in the calm waters of the harbour. Ships are returning to port for the evening, their sails catching the last light, their crews eager for rest after a day at sea. At the summit of the lighthouse, the day shift is preparing to hand over to the night crew. The fire has burned all day, visible as a column of smoke against the bright sky. Now, as darkness approaches, its true purpose will become apparent. The workers add more fuel, stoking the flames higher. The mirror is adjusted, angled to catch the fire's glow. The sun touches the horizon. For a moment, it seems to pause there, a great orange disk balanced on the edge of the world. Then it slips below and twilight begins. Stars appear, one by one, pricking through the darkening sky. The fire at the summit of the lighthouse seems to grow brighter as the sky darkens. What was a modest flame against the daytime brilliance now becomes a beacon, a torch, a second sun. The mirror catches the light and throws it seaward, a golden beam reaching across the dark water. Sailors far out at sea look up from their tasks. There it is, the light of Alexandria, steady and reliable, marking the way home. They adjust their course, setting their helms toward that distant glow. They know they are safe now. They know they will reach harbour. On the summit platform, the night watch settles into their routine. One worker tends the fire, adding oil from a great bronze vessel. The flames leap and dance, casting strange shadows on the walls of the circular chamber. The heat is still intense, but the night wind provides some relief, carrying the worst of it away. Another worker polishes the mirror, working in slow circular motions, removing the soot that accumulates with every passing hour. The bronze gleams in the firelight, its surface throwing back distorted reflections of the flames and the workers who tend them. A third worker stands at the edge of the platform looking out at the dark sea. He is the watchman, scanning the horizon for ships, for signals, for anything that might require attention. His eyes have adjusted to the darkness. He can see further than you might think possible. The hours pass slowly. The moon rises, fat and silver, over the eastern desert. It touches the surface of the sea and paints a path of light across the water, a second beacon, complementing the fire above. The waves catch the moonlight and break it into 1,000 glittering fragments. The sounds of the city fade. Alexandria sleeps. Only the guards on the walls are awake, and the sailors on the ships at anchor, and the workers here at the summit of the Pharos. The fire crackles and snaps. The wind sighs around the tower, finding the gaps between the stones. Somewhere below, an owl calls. And then, just before dawn, a ship appears on the horizon. The watchman sees it first, a dark shape against the barely lightening sky. He calls out, pointing. The others look, squinting into the dimness. It is a grain ship, heavy laden, riding low in the water. It has been at sea for weeks, carrying wheat from the fields of Egypt to the hungry cities of Rome. Now at last it is coming home. The sailors on that ship have been watching the light for hours. They first spotted it late in the evening, a tiny spark on the southern horizon. All night they have steered toward it, keeping it fixed on their bow, trusting it to guide them through the darkness. Now the sky is lightening, and they can see the tower itself, a white finger pointing at the sky, crowned with its eternal flame. They can see the harbour entrance, the breakwaters, the safe anchorage that awaits them. They have made it. The night watch is over. Fresh workers are climbing the ramp to take their places. The fire still burns and will burn all day, a column of smoke against the blue Egyptian sky. But its most important work is done. Another ship has found its way home. The light called them from across the sea. They came from Greece and Rome, from Carthage and Cyrenaica. They came from the ports of the Levant, Tyre and Sidon, Caesarea and Joppa. They came from the islands of the Aegean, from the shores of the Black Sea, from every corner of the known world. And they all saw the light. Alexandria became the greatest port the world had ever seen. At its height, the harbour could hold 1,200 ships. Imagine it, 1,200 vessels, their masts rising like a forest of stripped trees, their hulls jostling for space at the quays. The air thick with the smell of tar and salt, of spices and hides, of cargoes from 100 distant lands. The grain ships were the most important. Egypt was the breadbasket of the ancient world. The Nile Valley produced wheat in quantities that staggered the imagination, enough to feed the teeming millions of Rome, enough to keep empires from starving. 1/3 of Rome's grain supply came through Alexandria. Fleets of enormous ships, some carrying 1,000 tons of wheat, shuttled back and forth across the Mediterranean. The lighthouse guided them in, the lighthouse saw them safely out. But grain was not the only cargo. Ships brought papyrus from the Nile marshes, the paper of the ancient world, essential for record keeping and literature. Egypt held a monopoly on papyrus production, and Alexandria was the center of the trade. Ships brought spices from Arabia, frankincense and myrrh, cinnamon and pepper. These precious goods had traveled overland for thousands of miles, crossing deserts and mountain ranges, passing through the hands of a dozen middlemen. At Alexandria, they were loaded onto ships for distribution across the Mediterranean. Ships brought gems from India, rubies and sapphires, pearls and diamonds. They brought ivory from Africa, gold from Nubia, silk from the distant east. They brought wine from Greece and oil from Spain, tin from Britain and amber from the Baltic. All of it passed through Alexandria. All of it was guided by the light. The city grew rich beyond imagination. The Ptolemies built palaces that rivaled anything in the ancient world. They constructed temples to their gods and to themselves, for they claimed divine status, following the tradition of the pharaohs. They patronized artists and scholars, creating a culture that blended Greek and Egyptian traditions into something new. And they built the library. The Great Library of Alexandria was the wonder that complemented the lighthouse. If the Pharos brought the world's goods to Egypt, the library brought the world's knowledge. Every ship that entered the harbour was required to surrender its manuscripts for copying. The originals were often kept, the copies returned to the owners. Over decades, over centuries, the collection grew. Scrolls by the tens of thousands, perhaps by the hundreds of thousands. All of Greek literature from Homer to Aristotle. Works from Egypt and Babylon, from Persia and India. The accumulated wisdom of the ancient world gathered in one place. Scholars came to study this collection. Euclid wrote his Elements here, the foundation of geometry still studied today. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy. Callimachus created the first library catalogue. Apollonius composed epic poetry. Archimedes visited and left his mark. The lighthouse guided ships. The library guided minds. Together they made Alexandria the center of the ancient world. The light has witnessed much. Empires rise and fall, dynasties flourish and fade. Wars are fought and forgotten, through it all the flame burns on. In 48 before the Common Era, the lighthouse watched as Julius Caesar sailed into Alexandria. He came as a conqueror, or perhaps as a peacemaker, depending on whom you asked. The Ptolemaic dynasty was tearing itself apart. Ptolemy XIII, a boy of 13, was at war with his sister Cleopatra. The streets of Alexandria ran with blood. Caesar was pursuing Pompey, his rival in the Roman civil war. Pompey had fled to Egypt, hoping to find refuge with the Ptolemies. Instead, he found death murdered by Ptolemy's advisors, who hoped to curry favor with Caesar. They misjudged their man. Caesar was furious at the killing of a Roman consul, even an enemy. He seized Alexandria and placed himself in the midst of the succession dispute. What followed was the Alexandrian War. For months, Caesar was besieged in the palace quarter, surrounded by hostile forces. Cleopatra came to him, smuggled in, legend says, wrapped in a carpet, and became his ally and lover. Together, they fought to control the city. The lighthouse became a strategic prize. Caesar placed a garrison there, recognizing its importance. Whoever controlled the Pharos controlled access to the harbour. From the lighthouse, soldiers could observe approaching ships, signal to allies, rain missiles down on enemies. There was fighting on the Heptastadion, the causeway connecting Pharos to the mainland. Caesar's forces battled for control of this vital link. At one point, the fighting went against them, and Caesar was forced to leap into the water and swim for safety. Legend says he held his cloak in one hand and documents in the other, kicking with his legs while enemy missiles splashed around him. Whether or not this is true, he survived. The Alexandrian War was won. Cleopatra was placed on the throne. And the lighthouse remained, slightly damaged perhaps, but still burning. Strabo, the Greek geographer, visited Pharos Island a few decades later. He found it largely uninhabited, the fighting had taken its toll, but the tower still stood, the fire still burned. The light endured. The centuries rolled by like waves upon the shore. The Ptolemies gave way to the Romans. Cleopatra, the last of her line, died by her own hand in 30 before the Common Era. Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, its grain feeding the imperial capital, its treasures filling the imperial coffers. And still the lighthouse burned. Roman engineers maintained the structure. They repaired damage from storms and earthquakes, replaced stones that had cracked or fallen, kept the flame fed and the mirror polished. The lighthouse was too valuable to let fall. The Roman peace brought prosperity to Alexandria. The city remained one of the great ports of the Mediterranean, second only to Rome itself. Ships came and went in endless procession, guided by the light that never slept. Emperors visited, some to marvel, some to worship at the shrines of Serapis and Isis, some to consult the scholars of the library. The lighthouse watched them all unchanged and unchanging, a constant in a world of flux. Christianity came to Alexandria, transforming the old temples into churches, the old philosophies into new theologies. The city became one of the great centers of Christian thought. Origen and Athanasius, Clement and Cyril, these names ring through the history of the church. And still the lighthouse burned. It burned when Rome fell. It burned when the Byzantine emperors ruled from Constantinople. It burned through wars and plagues, through earthquakes and riots, through all the convulsions of an age. In 641 of the Common Era, Arab armies conquered Egypt. The old Roman world was ending. A new Islamic civilization was beginning. The conquerors marveled at the lighthouse just as earlier visitors had marveled. They called it wonderful, they called it magical, they attributed to it powers that no structure could possess. The medieval Arab travelers have left us the most detailed descriptions of the lighthouse. Al-Masudi, writing in the 10th century, estimated its height at 230 cubits. He recorded the legends that had grown around it, tales of a mirror that could see across the sea to Constantinople, of a fire that could burn enemy ships at a distance. Ibn Jubayr, visiting in 1183, called it one of the greatest wonders of the world. He described the 3 tiers, the internal chambers, the fire that burned at the summit. He said that description falls short of it, that the eyes fail to comprehend it, that words are inadequate to capture so vast a spectacle. Al-Balawi in 1165 made the most careful measurements. He descended the interior with a weighted string, calculating the height of the first tier at 77 meters. He counted the rooms on each floor, noted the dimensions of the ramp, described the experience of ascending in meticulous detail. These men saw the lighthouse in its final centuries. They did not know it was dying. The Mediterranean is not a peaceful sea. Beneath its blue waters, the African and Eurasian plates grind against each other, building pressure over centuries, releasing it in sudden, violent earthquakes. The region has been shaped by these forces, mountains rising, islands forming, coastlines sinking beneath the waves. The lighthouse had stood for nearly 800 years. It had weathered storms and sieges, the rise and fall of empires, the changing of faiths and the passing of ages. It seemed eternal. But even the eternal must end. The first major earthquake struck in 796 of the Common Era. We do not know exactly what damage it caused. The records from that time are sparse, but cracks appeared in the structure and the base suffered some damage. Repairs were made. The light continued to burn. Another earthquake came in 951. More damage, more repairs. The lighthouse stood, but it was not as strong as it had been. The worst came in 956. This earthquake toppled the upper 20 meters of the tower. The crowning statue, Zeus or Poseidon, Helios or Ptolemy, fell from its ancient perch and shattered on the rocks below. The circular third tier was badly damaged. The keepers of the lighthouse did what they could. They cleared the rubble, stabilized the structure, and built an Islamic-style dome atop the remains. The tower was shorter now, less magnificent, but it still functioned. The fire still burned. The mirror still reflected. Ships still found their way home. For 3 more centuries, the damaged lighthouse served its purpose. But the earthquakes were not finished. In 1303, a massive earthquake struck the eastern Mediterranean. Its epicenter was near Crete, over 200 miles from Alexandria, but the shaking was felt across the entire region. Buildings collapsed throughout Egypt. The ground heaved and shook. The lighthouse, already weakened, suffered catastrophic damage. Walls that had stood for 15 centuries cracked and crumbled. Stones that had been placed by Sostratus's workers shifted and fell. And 20 years later, in 1323, another earthquake delivered the final blow. The tower did not collapse all at once. There was no single dramatic moment when the whole structure came crashing down. Instead, it died slowly, piece by piece, year by year. By the time Ibn Battuta visited in 1349, it was in a state of complete ruination. He could not enter. He could not climb to the doorway. The greatest traveller of the medieval world could only look at the ruins and wonder what it had been like in its glory. The fire had gone out at last. Let us stand with Ibn Battuta for a moment. It is 1349. He has been travelling for 24 years, crossing the Islamic world from Morocco to China, from the steppes of Central Asia to the shores of Africa. He has seen more of the world than almost any human being before him. And now he stands before the ruins of the Pharos. He has been here before. In 1326, on his first journey, he visited Alexandria and saw the lighthouse. It was already damaged then, one of its faces in ruins, he noted. But he could still enter, could still climb the interior, could still marvel at the chambers and corridors within. Now, 23 years later, he has returned. And it is gone. Not entirely gone, of course. The lower sections still stand, massive and broken. The stones are scattered across the island and into the harbour, a jumble of rubble where once a tower rose to the sky. But the structure itself, the interior with its winding ramp, the chambers where workers once lived, the summit where the fire once burned, all of that is past recovery. Ibn Battuta writes in his journal. He notes the state of complete ruination. He records that the Sultan an-Nasir Muhammad had planned to build a new lighthouse, but the Sultan had died in 1341, and the plan had died with him. There would be no new Pharos. The wonder of the world had passed from the world. Ibn Battuta moves on. There are more journeys to make, more wonders to see. He will travel for years yet before returning home to Morocco, where he will dictate his memoirs to a scribe. But he carries the lighthouse with him, the memory of what he saw in 1326, the sorrow of what he could not see in 1349. In his writings, both moments are preserved. He is the last reliable witness to the lighthouse as a standing structure. After him, there are only ruins and legends. The story does not end with collapse. In 1477, the Ottoman Empire was rising. Constantinople had fallen to Sultan Mehmed II in 1453, and the Ottomans now controlled the eastern Mediterranean. Egypt, still under the rule of the Mamluk sultans, faced a growing threat. Sultan al-Ashraf Saif al-Din Qaitbay was a warrior and a builder. He understood that Alexandria's harbour, the same harbour that had made the city great under the Ptolemies, was now a vulnerability. Ottoman ships could sail into the port and threaten the entire country. The Sultan needed a fortress, and he knew exactly where to build it. The platform that Sostratus had laid 15 centuries earlier was still sound. The massive foundation stones, designed to support the weight of the lighthouse, could easily bear the weight of a citadel. Qaitbay's engineers went to work. They gathered the fallen stones of the lighthouse, limestone and granite, marble and brick, and used them to construct new walls. Some of those stones still bear the marks of their origin, darker and older than the medieval masonry around them. By 1480, the citadel was complete. It stands to this day, a squat fortress of grey stone overlooking Alexandria's eastern harbour. Visitors who go there can stand on the same ground where the lighthouse once stood, can touch stones that Ptolemaic workers placed, can look out at the same sea that countless sailors once scanned for the guiding light. The citadel is a monument to the lighthouse's destruction. But it is also a kind of continuation. The same strategic importance that made the lighthouse essential made the citadel necessary. The same foundation supports both structures. The same stones, rearranged, serve a new purpose. Nothing is ever entirely lost. Even ruins can become the material for something new. For centuries, the lighthouse existed only in memory. Travelers read the ancient descriptions and tried to imagine what it had looked like. Artists painted fanciful images, based more on imagination than evidence. Scholars debated its dimensions, its design, its engineering secrets. And all the while, beneath the waters of Alexandria's eastern harbour, The stones were waiting. In 1968, Egyptian authorities were planning to construct a breakwater near the site of the ancient lighthouse. Before they could begin, they needed to survey the harbour floor. What they found astonished them. The seabed was littered with massive stone blocks, granite and limestone, some weighing 50 or 60 tons. There were fragments of statuary, bases of columns, pieces of carved stone. There was, in short, an entire ancient monument lying on the ocean floor. The lighthouse had not simply collapsed, it had fallen into the sea. The discovery led to decades of investigation. In 1994, a French archaeologist named Geneviève Empereur arrived in Alexandria. He was the founder of the Centre d'études alexandrines, the Centre for Alexandrian Studies, and he had spent years researching the ancient city. When the Egyptian government called for an archaeological survey before the breakwater construction, Empereur saw his chance. He assembled a team of archaeological scuba divers and began a systematic exploration of the harbour floor. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. Over 3,000 objects were photographed and catalogued. There were 30 sphinxes, 5 obelisks, countless statues and architectural fragments. There was a colossal statue of a king, probably Ptolemy II, and a companion statue of a queen dressed as the goddess Isis. And there were the stones of the lighthouse itself. Empereur found the great lintel and doorjambs that had formed the entrance, 13 meters high, carved from solid granite. He found foundation stones and paving blocks, columns and capitals. He found the broken remnants of the wonder that had guided ships for 16 centuries. In 2025, after 30 years of underwater research, archaeologists raised 22 of the largest blocks from the seabed. Some weighed up to 80 tons. Among them were monumental door parts, threshold stones, foundation blocks, and a pylon segment that had never been documented before. These stones are now being studied and preserved. Digital reconstructions, based on the recovered materials, are allowing scholars to understand the lighthouse as never before. The Pharos is coming back to light. We will never fully know what the lighthouse looked like. The ancient descriptions are fragmentary and often contradictory. The medieval accounts are more detailed, but by the time they were written, the lighthouse had already suffered centuries of damage and modification. The questions remain. How tall was it exactly? Estimates range from 100 to 140 meters. The different measurements depend on which cubit the ancient writers used, how they counted, what parts of the structure they included. What did the statue at the summit represent? Zeus, Poseidon, Helios, a Ptolemaic king? The ancient sources cannot agree, and the statue itself fell in the earthquake of 956, never to be seen again. How did the mirror work? We know it was bronze polished to a high shine. We know it was curved to focus light. But the exact design, the precise engineering that allowed it to project a beam visible for 30 miles or more, remains uncertain. And what were the legendary powers attributed to it? Medieval writers claimed the mirror could see across the sea to Constantinople, that it could burn enemy ships at a distance. These claims are physically impossible, but did they originate in some real feature of the mirror? some optical effect that seemed magical to ancient observers. We have lost the lighthouse itself, but we have not lost its influence. The word Pharos became, in many languages, the word for lighthouse. The French say fair, the Italians and Spanish say faro. The design of the three-tiered tower influenced minarets and towers for centuries. The idea of a permanent navigational beacon, maintained at public expense for the safety of all mariners, shaped maritime law and practice down to the present day. Every lighthouse that burns today is, in some sense, a descendant of the Pharos. Every ship that follows a light into harbour owes something to Sostratus and his workers. What does it mean to build a wonder? The Pharos cost 800 talents of silver, more than 23 tons of precious metal, twice the price of the Parthenon. Thousands of workers laboured for decades. Resources were drawn from across Egypt, stone from distant quarries, bronze from smelters, oil from olive groves and flax fields. All of this to light a fire on a rock. And yet the investment paid for itself many times over. Every ship that reached Alexandria safely was a ship whose cargo enriched the kingdom. Every merchant who chose Alexandria over rival ports brought trade and taxes. Every sailor who survived a voyage to the Pharos-lit harbour became a living advertisement for Egyptian competence and generosity. The lighthouse was practical, but it was also symbolic. It said to the world, we can do this. We can build mountains of stone and make them glow with fire. We can tame the darkness and guide you home. The 7 wonders of the ancient world were not chosen only for their size or cost. They were chosen for what they represented, the heights that human ambition could reach, the problems that human ingenuity could solve. The pyramids showed that we could defy death, building tombs that would last for eternity. The hanging gardens showed that we could defy nature, making flowers bloom in the desert. The Colossus showed that we could defy scale, casting bronze statues as tall as the gods. And the Pharos showed that we could defy darkness. That where there was danger, we could create safety. That where there was confusion, we could provide guidance. That even across 30 miles of dark and dangerous sea, we could send a light that said, "Come home." Consider light. It is the most fundamental of human needs after air and water and food. We wake with the light and sleep when it fades. Our moods rise and fall with the sun. Our festivals cluster around the solstices and equinoxes, the turning points of the light. Before fire, our ancestors lived at the mercy of the darkness. Predators hunted in the night. Cold crept in when the sun went down. Half of life was spent in waiting for the dawn. Then came fire. Fire changed everything. Suddenly, the night was ours. We could cook our food and warm our bodies. We could see our companions' faces after sunset. We could push back the darkness and make spaces of safety in a dangerous world. The lighthouse took this ancient victory and multiplied it 1,000-fold. Fire at ground level lights a small circle, a camp, a room, a village square. But fire atop a 100-meter tower lights the world. It reaches across impossible distances. It turns night into a kind of day, at least for those who know to look for it. The Pharos was the ultimate expression of humanity's conquest of darkness. It said, "Even the vastness of the sea cannot hide you from our light. Even the furthest horizon cannot escape our care. And something in the human heart responds to this. We speak of guiding lights and beacon fires. We talk of those who light the way. When we want to describe someone who leads or inspires, we say they are a light in the darkness. These metaphors are not accidents. They come from something deep in our nature, something that remembers the first fires and the safety they brought. The lighthouse speaks to this part of us. It is not just a building. It is a symbol of protection, of guidance, of the human refusal to leave anyone lost in the dark. Let us think of them, the sailors who came home. They are countless. Over 1600 years, the lighthouse guided perhaps millions of ships into Alexandria's harbour. Each ship carried a crew. Each crew member had a family waiting. Think of a young sailor on his first voyage. He has been at sea for weeks, crossing from some distant port. The voyage was hard. Storms and calms, short rations and long watches, the endless empty horizon that stretched in every direction. He is tired, he is sunburned and salt-crusted, his hands raw from ropes, his muscles aching from the constant work of a ship at sea. He has begun to wonder if the voyage will ever end, if there is any land beyond this endless water. And then one evening he sees it. A light on the horizon. At first he thinks it might be a star, low on the southern rim of the world. But stars do not grow brighter as you approach. Stars do not flicker with the warmth of fire. It is the Pharos. He has heard of it, of course. Every sailor in the Mediterranean knows the Lighthouse of Alexandria, but hearing is not seeing. Stories are not the same as the thing itself. As the ship sails through the night, the light grows stronger. By midnight, he can see it clearly, a column of flame reflected by something that makes it brighter than any ordinary fire. By dawn, he can see the tower itself, white against the pale sky, rising impossibly high. And then they are in the harbour, safe home. This scene repeated itself countless times. Different sailors, different ships, different centuries, but always the same story. The light appeared, hope returned, home grew near. The Pharos has been gone for nearly 700 years. But lighthouses still stand on every coast. They are smaller now, automated, maintained by machines rather than workers with oxen and oil, but they serve the same purpose. They say, here is safety, here is home. On the cliffs of Cornwall, lighthouses guard the rocks that have wrecked 1,000 ships. In the bays of Japan, they mark the entrances to harbours. On the coasts of Australia, of South America, of Africa and India, they burn through the night. Each one descends, in a way, from the Pharos. The engineers who designed the first modern lighthouses studied the ancient accounts. They learned what they could from Strabo and Pliny, from Al-Balawi and Ibn Jubayr. They asked themselves, what made it work? What can we adapt? The answers shaped modern lighthouse design. The stepped profile, broad at the base, narrower at the top, provides stability against wind and wave. The spiral staircase allows access to the lantern room. The reflector behind the flame multiplies its brightness. All of these features appear in the ancient descriptions of the Pharos. All of them were adopted by later builders. Technology has changed. We use electricity now, not fire. Lenses focus the light instead of bronze mirrors. Computers control the timing and intensity of the beam. But the purpose remains the same. Guide ships, save lives, push back the darkness. The sun is setting now. We have spent the day exploring the lighthouse, its history, its construction, its workers and visitors. We have climbed the spiral ramp and stood at the summit. We have watched the fire kindle and the mirror begin to glow. Now the light is fading and it is time to rest. Imagine yourself standing at the base of the lighthouse, looking up at the darkening sky. The first stars are appearing. The evening wind is rising, carrying the salt smell of the sea. Above you, the tower rises into the twilight. The white marble has turned golden with the last light, then pink, then purple. The fire at the summit is just becoming visible, a small flicker of orange against the deepening blue. Sailors at sea are looking toward this light now, setting their course, preparing for the final approach to harbour. By morning, their ships will be tied up at the quays, their cargoes unloaded, their voyages complete. But that is tomorrow. Tonight the light burns. Tonight the darkness is held at bay. Tonight you are safe. Let us pause for a moment to remember the other wonders. The Pharos did not stand alone. It was one of 7, a member of an elite group of monuments that the ancient world deemed worthy of remembrance. Each wonder told a different story about what human beings could achieve. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands to this day, the only one of the 7 that has survived more or less intact. It was built around 2560 before the Common Era, 2,000 years before the Pharos, and it will likely stand for 2,000 years more. A mountain of stone on the edge of the desert, built to house the body of a single king. The pyramid was already ancient when Sostratus laid the foundations of the lighthouse. Egyptian priests told Greek visitors that their ancestors had been stacking stones while the Greeks were still living in caves. The pyramid represented permanence, stability, the defiance of death itself. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was considered by many to be the most beautiful of the wonders. It was a Greek temple, built on the coast of what is now Turkey, dedicated to the goddess of the hunt. 127 marble columns rose 60 feet into the air, supporting a roof of cedar wood and tiles of marble. The temple was destroyed and rebuilt several times. An arsonist named Herostratus burned it in 356 before the Common Era, the very night that Alexander the Great was born. It was rebuilt more gloriously than before, only to be destroyed again by Goths in 262 of the Common Era. Today, only a single column remains standing amid the marshes. The statue of Zeus at Olympia was the work of the sculptor Phidias. It depicted the king of the gods seated on a throne, his body of ivory, his robes of gold, his expression one of divine benevolence. Ancient visitors who saw it said the statue was so magnificent that it seemed alive. The statue stood in the temple at Olympia for nearly 1,000 years, surviving earthquakes and invasions until it was finally destroyed. We do not know exactly how or when. Some say it was burned when the temple caught fire. Others say it was carried off to Constantinople and destroyed there. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was a tomb built for Mausolus, a Persian satrap who ruled the region of Caria. His wife Artemisia commissioned the structure after his death. and it was so magnificent that it gave its name to all grand tombs thereafter, mausoleums, we call them in his honor. The mausoleum was decorated with sculptures by the greatest Greek artists of the age. Friezes depicted battles and hunts, gods and mortals. It stood for 16 centuries before being destroyed by earthquakes and dismantled by crusaders who used its stones to build a castle. The Colossus of Rhodes was a bronze statue of the sun god Helios, erected to celebrate the end of a siege in 280 before the Common Era, the same year the Pharos was completed. It stood perhaps 100 feet tall, overlooking the harbour of Rhodes. The Colossus stood for only 56 years before an earthquake brought it down. The Rhodians left the fallen statue where it lay, honouring it as a sacred ruin. Visitors came for centuries to marvel at its enormous limbs. Finally, in 654 of the Common Era, Arab invaders sold the bronze for scrap. And the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, that mystery among mysteries, the wonder that may never have existed at all. Terraces thick with trees, watered by ingenious machinery, a green mountain rising from the flat brown plain. Of these 7 wonders, the Pharos served the longest. The Colossus lasted 56 years. The gardens, if they existed, may have lasted a few centuries. The temple and the mausoleum and the statue survived until the medieval period. But the Pharos burned for 1600 years. Let us consider the light itself. Fire was the heart of the lighthouse. Without fire there would be no beacon, no guide, no purpose. The entire structure, all 100 meters of stone and marble, all the ramps and chambers and platforms existed to support and display a flame. The fuel was primarily oil. Wood was scarce in Egypt. The Nile Valley grew grain and papyrus, flax and vegetables, but few forests stood along its banks. Timber had to be imported from Lebanon or Greece, expensive and difficult to transport. A fire that consumed wood would quickly bankrupt the treasury. But Egypt had oil, olive oil from the groves of the delta, sesame oil from the fields of Upper Egypt, and later, as trade routes expanded, oils from across the Mediterranean and beyond. The fire burned in a great bronze brazier, fed by a constant drip of oil from reservoirs above. Workers adjusted the flow, controlling the intensity of the flame. Too little oil and the fire would dim. Too much and it would flare and smoke, wasting fuel and obscuring the light. The technology seems simple to us now, but consider what it required. A constant supply of fuel had to be maintained. Amphorae of oil, hundreds of them, had to be transporting from the mainland, loaded onto carts, hauled up the great ramp to the tower entrance, carried up the interior spiral to the storage chambers, and finally hoisted to the summit when needed. Workers had to understand the behavior of fire. They had to know how different oils burned, which gave the brightest flame, which lasted longest, which produced the least smoke. They had to understand how wind affected the fire, how to shield it from gusts without smothering it. They had to work in extreme heat, hour after hour, night after night. The summit of the Pharos was not a comfortable place. It was a furnace where men laboured in conditions that would be considered intolerable today. And then there was the mirror. This was the technological marvel that made the Pharos famous. A fire alone, however large, can only be seen for a few miles. but a fire reflected and focused by a polished mirror can be seen for dozens of miles. The mirror was bronze, a copper-tin alloy that could be polished to a brilliant shine. Some sources suggest it was 7 cubits across, perhaps 3.5 meters in diameter. It was curved like a shallow dish, designed to gather light from the fire and throw it in a single direction. The principles of optics were not fully understood in the ancient world. Euclid had written about the reflection of light, and later scholars would expand on his work. But the mirror keepers at the Pharos learned through practice and observation. They knew that the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection, though they might not have used those words. They knew that a curved surface focuses light, bringing scattered rays together into a concentrated beam. They knew how to position the mirror to maximize the lighthouse's visibility. Medieval legends attributed magical powers to the mirror. They said it could see across the sea to Constantinople, that it could burn enemy ships at a distance. These claims were physically impossible, but they suggest how impressive the actual technology must have been, impressive enough to inspire tales of wonder. Let us sail toward Alexandria. We are aboard a merchant vessel, heavy with cargo, 2 weeks out from the port of Ostia. We have crossed the Mediterranean from west to east, following the ancient route that thousands of ships have travelled before us. The voyage has been uneventful, the weather held. The winds were favourable. We passed Crete and Cyprus without incident, keeping the coast in sight when we could, trusting the stars when we could not. But now we are in the final approach. The coast of Egypt lies somewhere to the south, hidden below the horizon. We know it is there, we know it must be there, but we cannot see it. The captain stands at the bow, scanning the darkness. He has made this voyage many times. He knows these waters, knows the currents and the hazards, knows the signs that indicate land is near. But knowledge is not the same as certainty. Every voyage brings its own anxieties. The passengers are growing restless. They are tired of the ship, tired of the sea, tired of the endless horizon. They want to see land. They want to know that their destination is real. And then, just before midnight, a sailor in the rigging calls out, "A light." At first it seems impossible. We are still 30 miles from Alexandria, perhaps more. No ordinary fire could be visible at this distance. But there it is, a small point of orange on the southern horizon, barely distinguishable from the stars. It does not flicker like a star. It does not move. It simply burns, steady and constant, fixed in one spot on the edge of the world. The captain smiles. He has seen that light many times. He knows exactly what it means. He adjusts the helm, bringing the ship around until the light is directly ahead. From now until dawn, that light will be their guide. The passengers crowd the rails, staring at the distant glow. Some of them have never seen the Pharos before. They have heard stories, of course. Everyone has heard stories, but stories cannot prepare you for the reality. Through the night, the light grows brighter. What was a tiny spark becomes a visible flame. What was barely distinguishable from the stars becomes unmistakable, unique, the only light of its kind in all the world. By the time dawn breaks, the tower itself is visible, a white finger pointing at the sky, impossibly tall, crowned with its eternal fire. The harbour mouth is below it, marked by breakwaters that show sailors exactly where to turn. The voyage is almost over. The captain gives orders, sails are adjusted, oarsmen take their positions. The ship begins its final approach, guided by a light that has guided countless ships before. And the passengers stand at the rails, watching the wonder of the world grow larger before them. The lighthouse was not the only wonder in Alexandria. The city was home to the greatest library the ancient world had ever seen, perhaps the greatest library that has ever existed. The Mauseon, it was called, the Temple of the Muses. A research institution, a university, a gathering place for the finest minds of the age. Ptolemy I founded it, and his son Ptolemy II expanded it. They envisioned a place where all the knowledge of the world could be collected, organized, preserved. They sent agents across the Mediterranean to buy manuscripts, copy manuscripts, sometimes steal manuscripts. Every ship that entered Alexandria's harbour was required to surrender its books for copying. The originals were often kept, the copies returned to the owners. The library's collection grew and grew, 40,000 scrolls, 100,000, perhaps 500,000. No one knows for certain. Scholars came from across the Greek world to study in this collection. Euclid wrote his Elements here, the foundation of geometry, still used in schools today. His proofs, his axioms, his step-by-step reasoning shaped mathematics for 2,000 years. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth. He measured the angle of the sun at Alexandria and at Syene, far to the south. He knew the distance between the two cities. With these measurements and simple geometry, he determined that the earth was about 25,000 miles around. He was remarkably accurate. Callimachus created the first library catalogue, the Pinax, the tables. He organized the collection by author and subject, making it possible to find specific works among the vast holdings. He invented the concept of the bibliography. Apollonius of Rhodes composed the Argonautica, the epic tale of Jason and the Golden Fleece. Aristarchus proposed that the earth revolves around the sun, a theory that would not be accepted for another 18 centuries. Hipparchus created the first star catalogue and discovered the precession of the equinoxes. These scholars worked in the shadow of the lighthouse. They looked up from their scrolls and saw the tower rising above the city. They walked along the quays where ships guided by the Pharos unloaded their cargoes. They lived in a city that owed its existence to that light. The lighthouse and the library were two expressions of the same ideal, the idea that human beings could push back the boundaries of darkness and ignorance. One lit the way for ships at sea, the other lit the way for minds seeking knowledge. The lighthouse stood in all weathers. Summer brought scorching heat. The sun blazed down from a cloudless sky, baking the white marble until it hurt to touch. The workers at the summit laboured in conditions that would be intolerable today, the fire before them, the sun above, no escape from the relentless heat. But summer also brought calm seas. Ships crossed the Mediterranean with ease, their sails filled by steady winds from the north. The harbour was busy, crowded with vessels from every port in the known world. The lighthouse had much work to do. The summer nights were long and warm. The fire at the summit burned against a backdrop of countless stars. Workers stood at the platform edge, watching the dark water, feeling the gentle breeze that rose from the sea after sunset. Autumn brought change. The winds grew unpredictable. Storms could blow up without warning, driving ships onto the rocks or sweeping them out to sea. The lighthouse became more important than ever, a fixed point in a world of chaos, a guide for vessels struggling to reach safety. The rains began in late autumn, soft at first, then heavier. The marble tower gleamed with moisture. Pools formed on the platforms. Workers wrapped themselves in cloaks against the chill. Winter was the hardest season. The Mediterranean is not a tropical sea. The winters are mild by northern standards, but they bring genuine cold and genuine storms. Waves crashed against the base of the lighthouse, throwing spray 50 feet into the air. Winds howled around the tower, finding the gaps between the stones, making the structure groan and creak. Fewer ships sailed in winter. The dangers were too great, the profits too uncertain. But some vessels had no choice. Storm-driven ships, desperate for harbour, looked for the light of the Pharos and steered toward it with prayers on their lips. These were the nights when the lighthouse mattered most. These were the nights when the fire had to burn brightest, when the mirror had to be kept perfectly polished, when the workers had to struggle against wind and rain to maintain the light. Many ships were saved by the Pharos on stormy winter nights. Many lives were preserved by the steady glow that cut through the darkness. The workers never knew who they were saving. They knew only that the light must burn. The spring brought renewal. The storms subsided, the seas calmed. Ships began to sail again, their holds empty, ready to be filled with Egyptian grain for the hungry cities of the north. The workers repaired the damage of winter, stones that had cracked, mortar that had washed away, equipment that had rusted in the salt air. They cleaned and polished and prepared for another year. And the light burned on. Through heat and cold, through storm and calm, through all the turning seasons of the ancient world. The lighthouse lived longest in the words of those who saw it. The Arab travellers of the medieval period gave us our most detailed descriptions of the Pharos. They came from across the Islamic world, from Andalusia and Morocco, from Syria and Persia, from every corner of the vast caliphate that stretched from Spain to India. And they wrote down what they saw. Abu Hamid al-Gharnati visited Alexandria twice, in 1110 and again in 1117. He was an Andalusian, born in Granada, a city of fountains and gardens at the foot of the Sierra Nevada. He had seen wonders before: the great mosque of Cordoba, the palaces of the Moorish kings. But the Pharos amazed him. He described the 3 tiers clearly. The first tier is a square built on a platform, he wrote. The second is octagonal and the third is round. His description matches what archaeologists have reconstructed from underwater finds. His drawing of the lighthouse is considered remarkably accurate by modern researchers. Ibn Jubayr passed through Alexandria in 1183. He was a Muslim pilgrim, travelling from Spain to Mecca for the Hajj. The journey took him across North Africa, through Egypt, and on to the holy cities of Arabia. He kept a detailed diary of everything he saw. When he reached Alexandria, the lighthouse drew his attention immediately. It is one of the greatest wonders of the world, he wrote. It is most strongly built in all directions and competes with the skis in height. Description of it falls short, the eyes fail to comprehend it, and words are inadequate, so vast is the spectacle. He described the interior with evident wonder. The lighthouse has stairways and entrances and numerous apartments, he wrote, so many that one who penetrates and wanders through them may be lost. The building was not just a tower. It was a labyrinth, a vertical city, a place where you could spend hours exploring and still not see everything. He also noted the practical purpose. The lighthouse is a guide to voyagers, he wrote. Without it, they could not find the true course to Alexandria. It can be seen for more than 70 miles. Al-Balawi came in 1165, a builder from Malaga. He was not content merely to look and admire. He wanted to measure. He wanted to understand how the lighthouse was constructed, how its pieces fit together, how it had survived for 14 centuries. He entered through a utility door, not the grand entrance, but a smaller passage used by workers. He ascended the internal ramp, counting the rooms on each floor, 18 on the second level, 14 on the third, 17 on the fourth. He measured the height of the first tier by dropping a weighted string from the platform above. 77 meters, he calculated, over 250 feet. The ceiling of the ramp was just high enough for 2 horsemen to pass simultaneously. Al-Balawi climbed all the way to the summit. By 1165, the original statue had been replaced by an Islamic-style dome, the result of repairs after the earthquake of 956. But the fire still burned, the mirror still reflected, the light still reached across the sea. These travelers saw the lighthouse in its final centuries. They did not know that earthquakes would soon bring it down. They did not know that they were recording the last chapter of a story 1600 years in the making. But they wrote what they saw, and because they wrote, we remember. Let us imagine one of the workers. We do not know his name. The records of the Pharos workers have not survived, if they ever existed. We know only that someone tended the fire, someone polished the mirror, someone climbed the spiral ramp with loads of oil on their backs. Let us call him Marcus. Let us say he was Roman, or perhaps the son of Romans, born in Alexandria in the 3rd century of the Common Era. Let us imagine his life. Marcus was not born to the lighthouse. His father was a sailor, a man who had crossed the Mediterranean many times, who had seen the light of the Pharos from distant waters, who had guided his ship home by that steady glow. His father told him stories of storms and calm, of cargoes lost and fortunes found, of the light that was always there, waiting on the horizon. When Marcus was 15, his father was lost at sea. A storm somewhere between Alexandria and Rome, the ship never arrived, the cargo was never delivered, the sailors never came home. Marcus could not bear to go to sea after that. But he could not stay away from the water either. The harbour drew him, the smell of salt and tar, the calls of the sailors, the endless coming and going of ships. He found work on the docks at first, loading and unloading, hauling ropes and carrying crates. Then one day, a foreman from the lighthouse approached him. They needed workers, the foreman said, strong young men who could climb the ramp without tiring, who could work through the night, who could be trusted to keep the fire burning. The pay was good, the work was steady, and it served a purpose that Marcus understood. He said yes. For the next 40 years, Marcus worked at the Pharos. He started as a carrier, hauling amphorae of oil up the spiral ramp. It was hard work, the ramp was long, the loads were heavy, the heat at the summit was brutal. But he was young and strong, and he grew stronger with each passing month. In time, he was promoted. He learned to tend the fire, to judge the intensity of the flame, to add oil at precisely the right rate. He learned to polish the mirror, to understand the angles of reflection, to position the bronze disc for maximum visibility. He grew old in the service of the light. His hair turned grey, his muscles grew weaker. The long climb up the ramp became harder each year, but still he came. Still he tended the fire. Still he watched the ships approaching across the dark water. He thought of his father often. He wondered if his father had seen the light in his final moments, if that distant glow had offered any comfort, any hope, before the storm took him down. Marcus never knew. But he kept the fire burning anyway. Every ship that came home safely was a ship that might have carried someone's father, someone's son, someone's love. Every night that the light burned was a night when fewer hearts were broken by the sea. That was enough. The harbour wakes slowly. First light touches the eastern sky, a pale grey that spreads like water spilled on cloth. The stars fade. The fire at the summit of the Pharos dims against the brightening sky. The darkness retreats from the water, revealing the shapes of ships at anchor. On the quays, the first workers are stirring. Dockhands stretch and yawn, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They have slept in the shadow of the warehouses, wrapped in cloaks against the nighttime chill. Now they rise, ready for another day of loading and unloading, of carrying and hauling, of the endless commerce that makes Alexandria great. Merchants arrive, checking their inventories, negotiating with ship captains, making deals that will send goods to every corner of the Mediterranean. Their voices echo across the water, Greek and Egyptian, Latin and Aramaic, a dozen other tongues mingling in the morning air. Other ships begin to move. Some are preparing to depart, their holds full of Egyptian grain, their crews eager to begin the journey home. Sailors scramble up the masts, unfurling sails that catch the morning breeze. Anchors are raised. Ropes are cast off. One by one, the ships drift away from the quays and head for the harbour mouth. Others are arriving. They have sailed through the night, guided by the light of the Pharos, and now they are making their final approach. Pilots come out in small boats to guide them through the channels, around the sandbars and reefs that have wrecked so many vessels. The lighthouse watches over all of this. By day, the fire is less important. The white marble tower is visible for miles, a landmark that no sailor can miss. But the workers still tend the flame, letting it burn low but never letting it go out. The smoke rises in a thin column, marking the harbour entrance for ships that are still far out to sea. The harbour grows busier as the morning advances. Fish merchants set up their stalls, displaying the night's catch, tuna and mackerel, octopus and squid, the silver bounty of the Mediterranean. Shoppers arrive, housewives and servants with baskets on their arms, haggling over prices in the universal language of commerce. Carts rumble along the quays, carrying grain and wine, oil and cloth, all the goods that flow through Alexandria's harbours. The city is awake now. alive with the energy of 100,000 souls going about their daily business. And at the summit of the Pharos, the day shift has taken over from the night crew. Fresh workers are tending the fire, adjusting the mirror, scanning the horizon. The night crew is descending the spiral ramp, tired after their long watch, eager for food and sleep. The handover is complete. The light has been passed from one generation of keepers to the next, as it has been passed for centuries, as it will be passed for centuries more. The day has begun. Sometimes the sea is not kind. The storm comes from the northwest, building over the open water for days before it reaches Alexandria. The workers at the lighthouse see it coming, a dark line on the horizon, growing thicker and blacker as the hours pass. The wind picks up. At first it is just a freshening breeze, welcome after the heat of the day. Then it grows stronger. The waves rise, the harbour begins to churn. Ships in the harbour secure themselves. They double their anchor lines, furl their sails, batten down anything that might blow away. The experienced captains know what is coming. They have seen storms like this before. But somewhere out at sea, a ship is caught in the open. Perhaps it was delayed in its departure. Perhaps it misjudged the weather. Perhaps it simply had no choice, urgent cargo, impatient merchants, the demands of commerce overriding the counsel of caution. Whatever the reason, the ship is out there now, fighting the waves, struggling to reach safety before the storm overwhelms it. At the lighthouse, the workers stoke the fire higher. This is what the Pharos was built for. On calm nights, the light is a convenience, a helpful landmark, a reassuring glow. But on nights like this, the light is a lifeline. It is the only thing that stands between that distant ship and disaster. The flames leap and roar, fed by extra oil, reaching as high as the workers can make them go. The mirror catches the light and hurls it seaward, a golden beam cutting through the darkness and the rain. The wind howls around the tower. The workers can barely hear each other over the noise. They shout their orders, gesture with their hands, work by instinct and experience. The platform is slick with rain. The air is thick with spray. Visibility has dropped to almost nothing. But the fire must burn, the light must shine. Somewhere out there, a ship is looking for that glow. Hours pass. The storm reaches its peak and begins to subside. The wind drops. The waves calm. The rain fades to a drizzle, then stops altogether. And in the grey light of dawn, the workers see the ship. It is battered, its sails are torn, its rigging is tangled. It lists to one side, taking on water, barely able to make headway. But it is still afloat, it is still moving, and it is headed straight for the harbour mouth, following the light that has guided it through the night. The workers cheer. They are exhausted, they are soaked. They have been awake all night, fighting the wind and the rain to keep the fire burning. But the ship is safe, the sailors will live, the cargo will be delivered, and that is what matters. That is what the lighthouse is for. The lighthouse outlived the dynasty that built it. For nearly 300 years, the Ptolemies ruled Egypt. They were Greek kings in an Egyptian land, speaking Greek, worshipping Greek gods, surrounding themselves with Greek advisors and artists. But they adopted Egyptian customs too, the royal brother-sister marriages, the divine kingship, the elaborate rituals of the pharaohs. The dynasty produced scholars and builders, warriors and tyrants. Ptolemy II Philadelphus expanded the library and completed the lighthouse. Ptolemy III Euergetes conquered vast territories and brought treasures from across the east. Ptolemy IV Philopator was a patron of the arts, though his reign saw the beginning of decline. As the centuries passed, the Ptolemies grew weaker. The later kings and queens spent more time scheming against each other than governing their kingdom. Rome, rising in the west, began to cast a long shadow over the Mediterranean world. The end came with Cleopatra VII. She was the last Ptolemaic ruler, a woman of intelligence and ambition who fought to preserve her kingdom in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. She allied herself with Julius Caesar, then with Mark Antony, hoping that Roman protection would save Egyptian independence. It did not work. In 30 before the Common Era, the Roman general Octavian, soon to become the Emperor Augustus, conquered Egypt. Antony and Cleopatra died by their own hands. The Ptolemaic dynasty ended. But the lighthouse still stood. The Romans valued Egypt too much to let its infrastructure decay. The grain ships continued to sail, feeding the hungry millions of Rome. The lighthouse continued to guide them, just as it had guided the ships of the Ptolemies. New masters came and went, emperors rose and fell. The Roman Empire itself would eventually split and crumble. But the light burned on. What remains of the Lighthouse of Alexandria? The physical structure has crumbled. The stones lie scattered on the sea floor or built into the walls of the citadel. The fire has been cold for nearly 700 years. The mirror is lost, perhaps lying somewhere in the harbour sediment, perhaps melted down centuries ago. But the lighthouse endures in other ways. It endures in language. When the French speak of a fair, when the Italians say Faro, they are remembering the Pharos, even if they have forgotten its origin. The name has become the thing, the word has absorbed the wonder. It endures in architecture. The minarets of Cairo echo its three-tiered profile. Lighthouses around the world repeat its basic principles: height, visibility, a light that can be seen from far away. It endures in story. For over 2,000 years, people have been telling tales of the lighthouse, its construction, its fire, its legendary mirror. Travelers described it. Poets praised it. Artists imagined it in paintings that bore little resemblance to the reality. And it endures in something harder to name. The lighthouse represents an idea. The idea that human beings can create marvels. The idea that we can push back the darkness. The idea that somewhere, however far away, there is a light waiting to guide us home. This idea does not depend on stones and mortar. It does not require fire and bronze. It lives in the human heart, passed down from generation to generation, renewed each time someone tells the story. The Pharos may be gone, but as long as people dream of light in the darkness, it will never truly die. How do we remember what we have never seen? None of us have stood at the summit of the Pharos. None of us have watched the workers tend the flame, felt the heat of the fire, seen the mirror catch the light and throw it seaward. The lighthouse exists for us only in words and images, in stories and speculation. And yet, when you close your eyes and imagine it, something appears. A white tower rising against a blue sky, waves breaking at its base, smoke rising from the summit by day, fire glowing there by night, ships drawing near, guided by that steady, eternal light. Where does this image come from? Perhaps it comes from lighthouses you have seen, on coasts you have visited, in photographs and films, in the background of seaside paintings. The human memory of lighthouses is vast. They appear in story after story, symbol after symbol, always meaning roughly the same thing: safety, guidance, home. Perhaps it comes from something deeper, from our ancient association of fire with protection, of light with hope. We are creatures who evolved to fear the dark and cherish the dawn. A light on the horizon speaks to something primal in us, something that preceded language. The Pharos taps into this ancient longing. It represents the ultimate beacon, a light so great that it could be seen from the edge of the world, a fire that burned for 1600 years, a guide that never failed. When we imagine it, we imagine our deepest needs met, the need for safety in a dangerous world, the need for guidance when we are lost, the need for someone or something to show us the way home. The memory of the Pharos is not really a memory at all. It is a hope that such lights exist, that such wonders are possible, that however dark the night, there is always a beacon burning somewhere. It is a hope worth keeping. Let us return, one last time, to the shore of Alexandria. The night is deep now, the city sleeps. The harbour is quiet, the ships at anchor, their masts dark against the starry sky. Only the guards on the walls are awake, and the sailors on watch, and the workers at the summit of the Pharos. We stand on the quay, looking out across the water. The causeway stretches before us, disappearing into the darkness. At its end, the island of Pharos is invisible, a shadow against shadows, a darkness within darkness. But the lighthouse is not invisible. There at the summit, the fire burns. It is a small thing from this distance, a point of orange light, no brighter than a candle held at arm's length. But we know what it represents. We know how far that light can travel, how many ships it has guided, how many lives it has saved. The water laps gently against the stone of the quay. The night wind carries the smell of salt and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls. This is a peaceful moment, a moment between days, between voyages, between the busy hours of light and the deep hours of dark. The world seems suspended, balanced at rest. And at the center of this peace, the light burns on. It has always burned. Or at least it feels that way. The fire at the summit of the Pharos seems eternal, unchanging, as constant as the stars that wheel overhead. Empires rise and fall, dynasties flourish and fade, languages are born and die. But the light remains. Or so it seemed to those who watched it night after night, century after century. The light was always there. The light would always be there. The light was part of the order of the world. We know now that it ended. We know about the earthquakes, the gradual collapse, the final ruination. We know that the fire went out at last, that the tower fell, that the wonder passed from the world. But tonight, in our imagination, the light still burns. Tonight, the Pharos still rises against the starry sky. Tonight, ships are still finding their way home. The night deepens over Alexandria. The city grows quiet. The markets have closed, their stalls shuttered, their merchants gone home. The temples have dimmed their lamps, their priests retired to their chambers. The palace gates are barred. Only the guards remain awake on the great walls, their torches flickering against the darkness. And at the lighthouse, the fire continues to burn. Listen to it. The crackle and snap of the flames, fed by a constant supply of oil. The workers moving around the brazier, their footsteps soft on the stone floor. The wind sighing around the tower, finding the gaps between the stones. The mirror catches the firelight and sends it seaward, a golden beam reaching across the dark water. Ships far out to sea can see it. Sailors are adjusting their course, steering toward that distant glow. They will be here by morning. But you do not need to wait for them. You do not need to remember any of this. The names and dates, Ptolemy, Sostratus, Caesar, Qaitbay, let them fade. They are just names, they are just sounds. The numbers and measurements, 100 meters, 1600 years, 800 talents, let them drift away. They matter to scholars, they do not matter now. What matters is simpler. What matters is the light. It's the warm, golden light burning at the top of the world. The light that has guided ships across the dark sea. The light that is waiting for you. Let us walk the causeway. The heptastadion stretches before us, 7 stadia of stone, connecting Pharos Island to the mainland. It is one of the great engineering works of the ancient world, though few visitors pay it much attention. Their eyes are drawn upward to the lighthouse, but the causeway has its own story to tell. The builders faced a challenge. Pharos Island lay a short distance offshore, close enough to be visible, too far to be reached on foot. Ships could anchor there, but supplies had to be ferried across the water. Workers could be transporting by boat, but it was slow and unreliable. The Ptolemies wanted something better. They wanted a permanent connection, a road that would link the island to the city forever. The causeway was built in stages. First, massive stone blocks were sunk into the shallow water, forming a foundation. Then more blocks were laid on top, rising above the surface. The roadway was paved and reinforced, wide enough for carts and horses to pass. At 2 points along the causeway, channels were left open beneath arched bridges. Ships could pass through these channels, moving between the Great Harbour on the east and the Eunostus Harbour on the west. The bridges were high enough for masted vessels to pass beneath. As we walk along the causeway now, the stones are worn smooth by countless feet, the feet of workers and merchants, soldiers and pilgrims, everyone who has crossed between the city and the island over the centuries. The sea stretches on either side of us, blue and calm, its surface broken only by the passing ships. To our left, the great harbour. Royal ships lie at anchor there, their gilded prows gleaming in the sunlight. The palace quarter rises beyond, a maze of gardens and colonnades where the Ptolemies hold court. To our right, the commercial harbour. Merchant vessels crowd the quays, their crews unloading cargoes from across the Mediterranean. The air is thick with the smell of spices and timber, of fish and tar. And ahead of us, the lighthouse. It seems to grow taller as we approach, its 3 tiers rising one above another until they pierce the very sky. The white marble dazzles in the Egyptian sun. The fire at the summit is invisible by day, but we can see the smoke, a thin column rising straight up in the still air. We are almost there. At the base of the lighthouse, there was a garden. It was not a famous garden. No ancient writer described it in detail. No tourist came from across the world to see it. It was simply a small green space, carved out of the rocky soil of Pharos Island, tended by the workers who served the lighthouse. But at night it was beautiful. The fire at the summit cast a golden glow over the terraces. Shadows danced among the palm trees and the flowering shrubs. The scent of jasmine mingled with the salt air, creating something both exotic and familiar. The workers came here to rest between their shifts. They sat on stone benches, looking up at the stars, listening to the distant splash of waves. They talked quietly about their families, their hopes, the ships they had watched approaching across the dark water. Some of them had worked at the lighthouse for decades. They had watched young men arrive and grow old. They had seen the seasons turn year after year. They had tended the fire through storms and calms, through times of peace and times of war. The garden was their sanctuary, a place where they could escape for a few hours from the heat and the labour of their work, a place where they could breathe the night air and remember that they were alive. The garden is gone now. The earthquakes that toppled the lighthouse destroyed everything around it. The palm trees fell, the flowers withered, the stone benches crumbled into rubble. But for 1,000 years and more, the garden was there, and the workers who tended the fire knew its peace. Listen to the water. It is the oldest sound in the world. Long before there were lighthouses, long before there were cities, long before there were human beings to hear it, the waves were breaking on these shores. They have never stopped. The Mediterranean is a gentle sea most of the time. Its waves are smaller than the great rollers of the Atlantic or the Pacific. Its storms are fierce but brief. For most of the year it lies calm and blue, a highway for ships, a source of fish and salt. But even at its gentlest, it speaks. The waves lap against the stones of the harbour walls, a soft and constant murmur. The surf hisses on the sandy beaches. The wind stirs the surface into patterns of light and shadow. The workers at the lighthouse knew this sound well. It was the background to their lives. They heard it while they worked, while they ate, while they slept. It was so constant that they ceased to notice it until it changed. A storm would alter the rhythm. The gentle lapping would become a roar. The waves would crash against the island, sending spray 50 feet into the air. The lighthouse itself would seem to tremble, though its massive stones never truly moved. And then the storm would pass. The waves would settle, the murmur would return. The ancient rhythm would reassert itself as it always had, as it always would. The sound of the sea is patient. It has been making the same music since the world was young. It will continue long after the last lighthouse has fallen, long after the last sailor has crossed its waters. Let it speak to you now. The mirror gave birth to legends. In the centuries after the lighthouse was built, travelers brought home stories that grew more fantastic with each telling. The Pharos was real, anyone who had seen it knew that, but somehow the reality was not enough. The imagination of the ancient world added powers that no mirror could possess. They said the mirror could see across the sea to Constantinople, that a watcher at the summit could look into the polished bronze and observe ships far beyond the horizon, that the curvature of the mirror somehow magnified distant images, bringing them close enough to count the sailors on distant decks. This was impossible, of course. No mirror, however large, can show what lies beyond the curve of the earth. But the legend persisted for centuries, repeated by Arab writers who should have known better, passed down in manuscripts that still survive. They said the mirror could burn enemy ships, that in times of war, the keepers of the lighthouse could focus the sun's rays like a weapon, igniting the sails of attacking fleets from miles away. That whole navies had been destroyed by this terrible power, their wooden hulls bursting into flame before they could reach the harbour. This too was impossible. The physics simply do not work. Even a perfect mirror, many times larger than the Pharos mirror, could not focus sunlight with enough precision to ignite anything at a distance of miles. And yet the legend endured. Why? Perhaps because the lighthouse was genuinely awe-inspiring. Perhaps because ancient observers, seeing the light reach so far across the water, assumed that other miracles must be possible. Perhaps because we want our wonders to be truly wonderful, to exceed the bounds of what science permits. The legends tell us something important about the Pharos. They tell us that it inspired genuine amazement, the kind of amazement that turns into myth. One legend is more poignant than the others. It is said that when the mirror was finally removed, whether by earthquakes or by deliberate destruction, the people of Alexandria wept. They had grown so accustomed to its presence, so dependent on its light, that they could not imagine their city without it. The light had been part of their lives. It had been the first thing sailors saw when approaching home. It had been the last thing the dying saw from the windows of their sickbeds. It had burned through their childhoods and their children's childhoods, unchanging, eternal. And now it was gone. This legend at least may contain some truth. The lighthouse had served Alexandria for 1600 years. When it finally fell, the loss must have been felt deeply. Some things become part of the landscape of our lives. When they disappear, we feel their absence like a wound. Modern Alexandria is still a port city. It stretches along the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, home to millions of people, a centre of commerce and culture and faith. Ships still come and go, though they are larger now, and they carry cargoes that Ptolemy never imagined. The harbour is different. The heptastadion has silted up over the centuries. What was once a causeway is now solid land, connecting the former island of Pharos to the mainland as firmly as if they had always been one. The two harbours that once flanked the causeway have merged and changed. And on the site of the lighthouse stands the Citadel of Qaitbay. The citadel is a medieval fortress built in the 15th century from the stones of the fallen Pharos. It is squat and solid, built for defense rather than display. Its walls are thick, designed to resist the cannon fire of an age when gunpowder had transformed warfare. Visitors come to the citadel today. They walk along its battlements, looking out at the same sea that the ancient lighthouse once illuminated. They touch the stones of the walls, and sometimes they touch stones that were laid by Sostratus's workers 2,000 years ago. The darker stones are the older ones. Here and there among the medieval masonry, you can see blocks of a different colour, a different texture. These are the remnants of the lighthouse, granite and limestone, salvaged from the ruins and built into the new fortress. When you touch these stones, you are touching the Pharos. At the entrance to the citadel, 2 large stones sit where visitors cannot miss them. They are not part of any wall or structure. They are simply placed there as if on display, witnesses to the wonder that once stood on this spot. Modern Alexandrians walk past them every day, perhaps without thinking much about their history. But the stones remember. They remember the fire and the mirror, the ships and the sailors, the 16 centuries of light. Every lighthouse is a descendant of the Pharos. When the first modern lighthouses were built, in the 16th century, in the 17th, in the 18th, their builders studied the ancient accounts. They read Strabo and Pliny, they pored over the descriptions of medieval travellers. They tried to understand how Sostratus had achieved what he achieved. The lessons they learned shaped lighthouse design for centuries. Build high, the Pharos taught them. The higher the light, the farther it can be seen. The curve of the earth limits visibility, but height extends it. A light at the top of a 100-metre tower can be seen from 30 miles away. Build strong, the Pharos taught them. The sea is merciless. Waves batter foundations. Salt spray corrodes metal. Storms test every joint and seam. Only the most solid construction can withstand such forces for decades, let alone centuries. Use reflectors, the Pharos taught them. A fire alone is limited, but a fire reflected by a polished surface can be magnified many times over. The bronze mirror of the Pharos became the silver mirrors of early modern lighthouses, and later the glass lenses that focus light with even greater precision. Build access for maintenance, the Pharos taught them. The spiral ramp allowed workers and supplies to reach the summit. Modern lighthouses have similar features: stairs and elevators, storage rooms and keepers' quarters, everything needed to maintain the light through storms and isolation. Today there are lighthouses on every coast. On the rocky shores of New England and the sandy beaches of Florida, on the cliffs of Scotland and the fjords of Norway, on the islands of Japan and the reefs of Australia. Wherever ships sail and sailors need guidance, the lights are burning. Most are automated now. Computers control the beams. Solar panels and batteries provide power. Satellites and GPS have made navigation easier. The lonely lighthouse keeper, tending the flame through the night, is a figure of the past. But the purpose remains the same. Guide ships, save lives, push back the darkness. The Pharos has been gone for nearly 700 years, but its children still burn on every shore. The sea holds many secrets. In 1994, When Genevieve Emperor and his team of archaeologists dove into Alexandria's eastern harbour, they found a world that time had preserved. The stones of the lighthouse lay scattered across the seafloor, tumbled by earthquakes and currents but still recognisable. They found granite blocks weighing 50 tons or more. Some had been broken by the fall. Others remained whole, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of salt water. They found the great doorjambs that had framed the lighthouse entrance, 13 meters tall, carved from single pieces of stone. They found statues, sphinxes from an earlier age, some of them dating back to the time of Ramesses II, 1,000 years before the Ptolemies. The lighthouse builders had reused these ancient sculptures, incorporating the power of the pharaohs into their new wonder. They found colossal royal figures, a king and queen, probably Ptolemy II and his wife Arsinoe, their stone faces gazing sightlessly through the dark water. These statues had once stood at the base of the lighthouse, greeting visitors as they approached. The discoveries continue. In 2025, archaeologists raised 22 of the largest blocks from the seabed. These stones are being studied now, helping researchers understand how the lighthouse was built, what it looked like, how its engineering marvels worked. There is talk of an underwater museum. Visitors would descend into the harbour, walking through transparent tunnels or riding in submersible vehicles. They would see the scattered stones in their resting places, the sphinxes and statues still lying where they fell. The sea that destroyed the lighthouse may also preserve it. The salt water has protected the stones from the weathering that would have destroyed them on land. The cold and darkness have slowed the processes of decay. What the earthquakes threw down, the sea has kept safe. Let us watch the sun set over the Mediterranean. The day is ending. The work of the harbour is winding down. Ships have returned to their anchorages. Merchants have closed their stalls. The bustle of commerce is giving way to the quiet of evening. The sun hangs low in the western sky. It touches the horizon and begins to